The lunch is excellent. It is always excellent. The restaurant is called Harvey's, and it is on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C., and you have been eating here with the same man every other Tuesday for 3 years. The lobster is good. The wine is better. The conversation is the best intelligence product you receive all week. The man across the table is Kim Philby. He is 40 years old. He speaks with the particular accent of an English upper-class education, Westminster School, Trinity College, Cambridge, delivered with the easy confidence of someone who has never needed to perform confidence because the world arranged itself around him before he was old enough to notice it doing so. He is the chief liaison officer between British intelligence and the Central Intelligence Agency. He has a desk at the British Embassy on Massachusetts Avenue. He has a clearance that gives him access to every joint operation running between Langley and MI6. He orders the lobster. He refills your glass. He is the most valuable intelligence relationship you have ever built. He is also the reason that every agent you have ever shared with him is either dead or running for their life in a country where running does not help. You do not know this yet. You will not know it for 12 years. 12 years of lobster and wine and the best conversation in Washington, while the man across the table carries everything you tell him home in his memory and types it up for Moscow by morning. This is the story of James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's chief of counterintelligence, and the most catastrophic intelligence betrayal in the history of the Western Alliance. It begins, like all catastrophes begin, with complete trust. Before I tell you how one man destroyed the CIA's intelligence network across an entire continent, from the inside of the CIA itself, I need to ask you something. Kim Philby was not a spy who was caught and turned. He was a spy who was recruited at Cambridge University in 1934 and spent the next 30 years never being caught. He rose to become the most senior British intelligence officer in Washington, D.C. He was nearly appointed head of MI6 itself. Here is my question for you. How does the most successful spy in Cold War history get away with it for 30 years? Comment below, because the answer is not what you think it is. And after this video, you will understand exactly how it happened and why it will happen again. It does not start in a government building, not in a briefing room, not in a training facility. It starts in a conversation between two young men at Trinity College, Cambridge, in the autumn of 1934. Harold Adrian Russell Philby, Kim, as everyone has called him since childhood, after the Kipling character, is 22 years old. He is the son of St. John Philby, one of Britain's most celebrated Arabists, and a man whose eccentric brilliance and contempt for conventional authority runs in the family like a genetic instruction. Kim Philby has just graduated with a first-class degree in economics. He has the world arranged before him. The Foreign Office, the diplomatic service, a comfortable upper-class English life moving through the institutions that upper-class English men move through. Instead, a man named Arnold Deutsch recruits him to the Soviet Union's Foreign Intelligence Service. Deutsch is a psychologist and Soviet intelligence officer operating undercover in Britain. He identifies Philby at Cambridge the same way he identifies the others, not for their politics, though their politics matter, but for the specific combination of intelligence, social access, ideological conviction, and psychological architecture that makes a person capable of sustaining a permanent deception across a lifetime. Philby has all four. He is ideologically committed. He believes genuinely and completely in the Soviet cause. He is socially positioned. He has the accent and the education and the connections to move inside the most restricted rooms in British and American intelligence without ever being looked at twice. He has the psychological architecture, the capacity to love people he is betraying, to maintain warmth and friendship and genuine affection while the betrayal runs at full speed underneath. And he is brilliant in a specific operational way. He understands institutions from the inside, how they think, what they fear, where their blind spots are. He says yes to Deutsch. He will say yes for 30 years. The first instruction from Moscow is simple. Stop being a communist. Not actually stop. Maintain the commitment. Maintain the conviction. Maintain the work. But stop being visibly communist. Stop attending meetings. Stop associating with known leftists. Acquire a surface that the British establishment will find acceptable, because the British establishment is the target and the surface is the tool. Philby is good at this. He works as a journalist. He covers the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, traveling with Franco's forces, presenting himself as a conservative sympathizer. The Times of London publishes his dispatches. The British establishment reads them approvingly. The surface is building. In 1940, Guy Burgess, himself a Soviet agent and one of the Cambridge Five, recruits Philby into MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service. Philby enters the building. Once inside, he begins the most consequential institutional climbing operation in the history of Western intelligence. He is promoted, he performs well, he is trusted, he is charming, he drinks heavily and socially, the way that British intelligence officers drank in that era, which is to say constantly, and at lunch, and without it being held against them. He cultivates every important relationship in the building. He identifies the people who matter and makes himself indispensable to them. And every evening, he leaves the office with his briefcase full of files, photographs, and reports. He hands them to his Soviet contact. He gets them back by morning. He returns them to the registry. Nobody notices because nobody is looking. Nobody is looking because nobody thinks to look. And nobody thinks to look because Kim Philby is one of them. The right school, the right accent, the right clubs, the right friends. By the end of the Second World War, he had become head of MI6's Section 9, the anti-Soviet section. The man running British intelligence's operations against the Soviet Union is the Soviet Union's most valuable agent inside British intelligence. Moscow cannot believe its fortune. In 1949, Philby was appointed first secretary to the British Embassy in Washington and chief liaison officer between MI6 and the Central Intelligence Agency. He is now the most senior British intelligence officer in the United States. The CIA officer, who becomes his closest contact, is James Jesus Angleton, 32 years old, Yale. Studied under the poet Archibald MacLeish. Thin, intense, orchid-growing, fly-fishing, a mind that moves through intelligence problems with the specific combination of brilliance and paranoia that makes exceptional counterintelligence officers and, sometimes, destroys them. Angleton will go on to become the CIA's chief of counterintelligence, the officer responsible for finding Soviet spies inside American intelligence. He and Philby have eaten lunch at Harvey's restaurant on Connecticut Avenue every other Tuesday for 3 years. Angleton later said that Philby was the most sophisticated intelligence officer he had ever met. He shared everything with him: the CIA's sources, the CIA's methods, the CIA's plans, the ongoing operations, the agents in the field. As one officer later wrote, Philby must have picked him clean. What Philby does with what Angleton gives him is precise and methodical and catastrophic. He tells Moscow which CIA agents in Eastern Europe are real. Moscow rolls them up quietly, leaving no trace, no arrests, no show trials, just the agents going silent one by one, each disappearance explainable as operational failure, bad luck, tradecraft errors. The CIA mourns them individually and does not see the pattern. He tells Moscow about the Albania operation. The CIA and MI6 plan to infiltrate armed anti-communist agents into Albania to destabilize the communist government. MI6 trains them. The CIA funds them. Philby sends Moscow every detail: the dates, the landing points, the weapons, the contacts, the route. Every agent who goes into Albania is met on the beach and killed. Dozens of men die on missions that Philby burned from his Washington office while lunching on lobster with the CIA's future counterintelligence chief. He tells Moscow about the Venona project, the American signals intelligence program that is decrypting Soviet communications from the 1940s. The decrypts are identifying Soviet agents inside the British and American governments. Philby reads the intelligence. He sees that the decrypts are closing in on Donald Maclean, one of the Cambridge Five, a senior British diplomat who has been passing Foreign Office secrets to Moscow for years. He warns Maclean through an intermediary. In May 1951, Maclean and Guy Burgess defected to Moscow. They escape because Philby warned them. The defection of Burgess and Maclean destroys Philby's cover. Partially. The problem is that Burgess had been living in Philby's house in Washington. The friendship is known. The association is undeniable. MI5 investigates. The CIA investigates. Angleton, who has been lunching with Philby for 3 years and sharing every intelligence secret he possesses, is asked to assess his friend. Angleton says Philby is not a spy. He is certain. He is absolutely wrong. Philby is recalled to London. He is interrogated. He performs what those who were present later described as a masterclass. He admits to the friendship with Burgess. He acknowledges the awkwardness. He presents himself as a loyal officer who is mortified by the association. He gives nothing. He maintains the surface that Deutsch built in 1934, and that 30 years of professional performance has made indistinguishable from the reality beneath it. He is not charged. He is asked to resign, which he does in July 1951. But he is not prosecuted. He is not convicted. He is not imprisoned. Because there is no evidence, only suspicion. And suspicion is not enough when the suspect is Kim Philby, product of Westminster and Cambridge, and 30 years of trusted service. In 1955, a member of Parliament named Philby in the House of Commons, as the third man who warned Burgess and Maclean. The Foreign Secretary, Harold Macmillan, publicly exonerates him. Philby returns to journalism. MI6 rehires him, quietly, as an agent in Beirut. He continues working for both sides simultaneously in Lebanon for 6 more years. In January 1963, a fellow Cambridge 5 member named Michael Straight, under pressure from the FBI, finally confirms what many had long suspected. MI6 sends Nicholas Elliott, Philby's closest friend, his most loyal defender, the man who had insisted for 12 years that Philby was innocent, to Beirut to confront him. Elliott sits across from Philby in a Beirut apartment and delivers the evidence. Philby listens. He confesses, partially, in the specific way that a man confesses who is calculating his options while appearing to have run out of them. Elliott returns to London to prepare the formal proceedings. Philby does not wait for them. On January 23, 1963, he boards a Soviet freighter called the Dolmatova in Beirut harbor. He arrives in Moscow 30 years after he said yes to Arnold Deutsch in Cambridge. He lived there until he died in 1988. He is given the rank of colonel in the KGB. He is awarded the Order of Lenin. James Jesus Angleton, who had lunch with him every other Tuesday for 3 years and shared everything, spent the next 20 years as CIA chief of counterintelligence, hunting for other Philbys inside the CIA itself. The hunt destroyed careers. It paralyzed operations. It poisoned the CIA's relationship with every allied intelligence service for a generation. Angleton became so consumed by the search for the mole he had missed that he became, in the end, more damaging to the CIA than the mole had been. One betrayal. 30 years. Hundreds of agents are dead or compromised. The CIA's counterintelligence apparatus was consumed by paranoia for 2 decades. The Western Alliance's most sensitive joint operations were handed to Moscow for the price of a lobster lunch every other Tuesday. The restaurant is excellent. It is always excellent. The man across the table refills your glass. He is telling you something important about a Soviet operation your agency has been tracking. He has access to the same files you have. He is the liaison. He is the bridge. He is the most sophisticated intelligence officer you have ever met. He knows things about you that no adversary should know. He knows them because you told him. And tonight, when the lunch is finished, and the wine glasses are empty, and the bill is settled, and you shake hands on Connecticut Avenue, and walk back to your respective offices on a Thursday afternoon in 1951, Washington, D.C., he will go home and type up everything you said. And by morning, Moscow will know it too. You will find out in 12 years, if you find out at all. The Cambridge 5 were not caught by brilliant counterintelligence work. They were caught, eventually, incompletely, years too late, because their own network began to unravel from the edges, because Venona decrypts closed in from the outside. After all, a peripheral figure named Michael Straight, 30 years after the original recruitment, finally broke under pressure in another country. Philby himself was never caught in the act, not once, in 30 years. The lesson that Angleton took from Philby is the lesson that broke him. If Philby could do it, anyone could. If the most trusted man in the building was the most dangerous man in the building, then trust itself was the weapon. And if trust is the weapon, the only defense is to trust no one. The lesson that Philby himself offered, in interviews he gave in Moscow after his defection, is simpler and more devastating. He said the British and American intelligence services were vulnerable because they recruited from a social class that trusted each other automatically. The accent, the school, the clubs, the manner, these were the cover. Not a manufactured cover like a Chinese-Korean consultant's biography, seeded into provincial databases. A natural cover, the cover of belonging, of being so obviously one of us that the question never fully forms. You cannot vet belonging. You can only vet what a person says and does, and where they went to school, and who they know, and whether their bank records look clean. And Philby's bank records appeared to be clean, and his school was Westminster, and his college was Trinity Cambridge, and his accent was perfect, and he was genuinely and warmly and without any performance required, a pleasure to have lunch with, every other Tuesday, for 3 years.